on One True Podcast. Alongside me, as always, is my good friend and colleague, John Werner. Johnny, good to see you.
Hey, Bryce. Good to see you, man.
Yeah. And joining us again, a past guest and an old friend of ours, Joseph Duarte of the Houston Chronicle. Joseph covers the Houston Cougars, which we'll get into that in a minute, but been at the Chronicle a long time. We were trying to figure that out. Feels like 25 years. Is that right, Joseph?
Yeah, roughly. But sooner or later, we're going to do one of these podcasts, and I'm going to be in a major conference too. Instead of bringing you Conference USA or American Athletic Conference news, maybe we could jump in and be colleagues in the same conference one day.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to get into that. Not that I really need an excuse, but with our Houston guy in the house, I mean, I did wear, look, Astros here. Obviously, you see the Rocket stuff behind me. So,
Johnny, Houston theme there.
Yeah, there's my Astros cup. So, yeah.
We get the
representing
idea.
for Joseph here, but so before we do jump into some of this realignment talk, John, so Baylor opened the season on Saturday with a 29-20 win over Texas State in San Marcos, a fairly pedestrian game. It certainly wasn't a blowout. You and I were down there in San Marcos. What did you see that you felt like was encouraging for the Bears? And then, what were some of the problem areas that maybe jumped out?
Well, the big thing was the running game. They had 238 yards. Both Abram Smith and Treston Ebner had over 100. Last year, they averaged 90.
Yeah, they were one of the worst that we've ever seen.
In fact, both Abram and Treston are over halfway to passing last year's leaders for Baylor.
Oh my gosh.
Remember, like 200 yards?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't get much worse than that.
It was relatively incredible.
Yeah, but before the game, dave-aranda said their first priority offensively was to establish the run, and man, they really did it. And I thought the offensive line played better. I mean, we'll see once they start playing some better teams, but just their commitment to the run was pretty impressive. And I thought Gary Bohannon handled everything pretty well. He was pretty accurate on his bootleg passes, play actions. His long passes need some work. He pretty much overthrew guys, but he showed he had a pretty good arm, which I don't think he really showed, when he got into games before. But yeah, I'd say just the running game, the offensive line was a big plus.
And as far as those concerning areas?
Yeah, well, I'd say the deep pass. They didn't really have any breakaway plays, explosive plays at all. And I think one thing a little disappointing was the pass rush. Now, Brady McBride he was pretty mobile. He had some escapability, but they did not put a lot of pressure on him. And, they're counting on Apu. It's a
Ika.
I always thought it was Ika, but I found out last weekend it's Ika. So they need more from him, to take, gobble up some blockers and, get some more guys in those pass rushing lanes. To me, that was the biggest disappointment. They just did not get much of a pass rush.
I'll throw one other area of concern for Baylor in there, and that's the penalties.
Yeah.
They were flagged 11 times for 99 yards. That is not good. And I've got a story. It'll be up online later today as we record this podcast, be on in Thursday's Tribune-Herald. But just talking about the flags, I think with penalties, there's always sins of aggression that you can sort of forgive, that, where guys just trying to make a play and maybe you hit a guy a little too high or however that happens. But for Baylor's perspective, there were a lot of silly, careless, sometimes pre-snap penalties. Raleigh Tejada, one of their best defensive players, had 3 flags in the game. He had 2 defensive holding and 1 pass interference. So they got to be better from that regard, especially playing better teams as they go forward. So something to keep an eye on. So now that we've kind of put the post-mortem on that, this week's game should be a pretty much a layup, I think, for Baylor against Texas Southern. And we did not bring Joseph on here to talk about Texas Southern, even though he's down in the Houston area. Texas Southern was blown out by Prairie View, 40-17. Again, Baylor playing at home against a SWAC team, which we found out, Johnny, that first game for Baylor ever against any SWAC opponent. That seems hard to comprehend.
Well, when you think how many they've played in basketball against SWAC opponents,
Yeah,
it is pretty hard to comprehend.
It really is. So let's skip over this game this week. We don't need to break down the Texas Southern game, and let's talk about what we brought Joseph on here to talk about. And that is that we have this news out there that the Big 12 is reportedly in the midst of extending some invitations to 3 American schools, American Athletic Conference schools: Houston, Cincinnati, UCF, and then I guess the outlier there, the independent, BYU. So Joseph, I'm going to start with you. Do you feel like, does this lock the Big 12 down in terms of maybe some long-term stability now? And what do you feel like these new programs bring? You're obviously, very familiar with the American schools.
Right. Well, first of all, Bryce, I think it at least takes the Big 12 off the deathbed for a while, in terms of, I think a month ago, when you lose your 2 anchor programs in Texas and Oklahoma, you have to wonder, is this the beginning of the end? Are you going to dissolve? Is everybody going to have to kind of run for the exits and every man for himself? But I thought the Big 12 did the only thing they could do. The American has been the best Group of 5 conference out there for many years. And when you look at the teams that they have, Cincinnati right now is in the top 10. Central Florida had their 2 big runs, and they bring a national championship with them from that undefeated year. And then Houston with some of the history, plus the metropolitan market, the eyeballs, if you will. So, for the Big 12 to go and do this preemptively, because if they didn't, the American probably would have, or the American would have tried to grab a couple of the other schools. So from the standpoint of what the Big 12 had to do, they lived to play another day. And I think adding the schools that they add, nobody's going to equal Texas and Oklahoma, but it at least, I think it'll keep their autonomous designation. And at the end of the day, when you look at what the revenue will be payout wise, it could have been a lot worse. And I think they managed to douse the flames before it became a full out, blaze.
Yeah, John, along those same lines, you and I have talked about it. I mean, the Big 12 needed to start being aggressive and adding some teams, right?
Yeah, I thought what happened in 2016 was pretty embarrassing. They had a bunch of schools apply. Houston was one of them. And for them not to add, a couple schools back then, with all the publicity around it, and then just stick at 10, I thought it showed a very lack of aggressiveness and foresight. But I like the way they're on the offensive now. Obviously, they're kind of desperate now, but at least they're going after them. And I think we asked Dave-Aranda yesterday what he thought about expansion. And one thing he did say was he's glad these Texas schools are sticking together. And of course, they're adding Houston now. Yeah, they'll replace Texas, and just so they'll still have a big footprint in this state and the Big 12. So I think that's a big plus. And adding those other schools, that really expands your footprint. I mean, BYU, UCF, Cincinnati, that's pretty much all over the map. And, you're going to get in those TV markets there. So I think it's a win all the way around.
You sort of, Bryce, you also, you get that Florida market, which, yeah, I think 5 years ago, people would have said, well, that's not important, but you get into that market, you get a travel partner for West Virginia, although some say West Virginia may end up, in the ACC at some point. And then you look at BYU. How long has the Big 12 wanted BYU or tried to get them? And I think that shows where they are, that they'll go after BYU and all these obstacles that they've had in the past, whether it's been their TV network or the playing on Sundays. They can look past some of that, or they can work around it, because let's face it, out of these four, BYU is going to bring you the most following, their fan base. It's a national brand. So I really think, you have to get BYU. And I agree with the reports that BYU is probably the number, if you had to rank them, BYU's number one on the list.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like you guys said, I mean, Texas and Oklahoma, you're not going to replace them in terms of brand name. I mean, they that's what they bring. I mean, even as Texas has basically been an underachiever these last, half a decade at least, and maybe longer, maybe decade, basically since Mac Brown left. But they're still Texas, and they still, bring those eyeballs. I think The Athletic maybe did a study where they ranked all the highest rated, Big 12 football games the last, I don't know how many years. And they were pretty much all involving Texas or Oklahoma. I mean, they brought the eyeballs. So, Joseph, I think you make a great point. BYU, to get a program of that magnitude with that kind of a fan base and following, I think that's key. John, you and I will have a story, I guess, later in the week, kind of introducing the new guys. I mean, it looks like it's definitely going to happen. There's a vote coming, I guess, from the Big 12 presidents maybe on Friday. So, it looks like the wheels are in motion, and, it'll be exciting. John, you also referenced 2016 when Houston was one of those teams that was bidding to get into the Big 12. And the conference opted to, like you said, stick at 10 schools. So I've heard some rumblings from different sources that Baylor was against adding Houston at that time, and that this time around, they also were at least initially against adding the Cougars, and they either acquiesced or they just were outvoted. At any rate, it looks like U of H is on its way in. Joseph, do you feel like there'll be some bad blood maybe between Houston and Baylor when U of H finally does join the league?
There was already bad blood when that tweet of that equipment truck outside of McLean Stadium went out. So there's gonna be bad blood regardless. But the way this thing played out, and John goes back to the breakup of the Southwest Conference and how messy that was, and we could sit here all day with who had who on their side in Austin and the politics and all that stuff. The truth of the matter is Baylor got in. Texas was going to get in. A&M was going to get in. Texas Tech. Who else? Am I forgetting? I think those were the schools.
Yeah.
So Houston's never forgotten that. They have been bitter to the very end, and they feel like what it did to their program and setting them back, and the resources and the money. But at the end of the day, the whole argument about, well, how does this affect recruiting, and what is this? What kind of competitive disadvantage does this put us at? This is a big stabbing. We live in this state. This is a big enough state for. I never buy the recruiting argument. Houston went out and got Ed Oliver a few years ago. They don't do that. I think they could do that again if they win. Same thing with Baylor. You look at all the other programs. It's just the ironic thing is, Houston has wanted to get into this league for so many years, and then when they do, the one team that their fans are already saying, "Oh, we're going to get to play the Longhorns one time," is out the door. So, it's not the same Big 12 that they're going into, that they envision, but it's certainly, I think, if you have to look at it from a standpoint of being a little bit more in the high rent district, that's what will appease them in the end. But this bad blood, somebody always finds something to about. It'll be the same with Texas Tech and TCU. I mean, it's just the way things go.
Yeah, Baylor and TCU, there's a lot of bad blood there.
Yeah. TCU was pretty upset that Baylor got the nod in the Big 12 to get in initially when they got left out, and that has certainly bubbled that rivalry. I mean, it's that one's fun just because of all that bad blood. Personally, obviously, we're excited to get maybe Joseph back in the league and see him, and no bad blood.
Bowles kept blocking me. Kirk Bowles, I think, was blocking my re-entry. Him and Cedric Golden, I blame those two. But I think I got enough votes now where, as Tillman Fertitta said, this was a sham the last time. So, I have my fingers crossed, but I won't pop the champagne until we know for sure.
A little cautious. Okay.
Good stuff. Well, we're certainly sad to see Kirk and Ced go. But Johnny, we'll have to continue to have them on the podcast because they're classic. As far as Big 12 goes this week, we have a top 10 matchup. It's the big game in the Big 12, but also maybe the biggest in the country. For the first time in the history of that Cy-Hawk rivalry that they call, Iowa State and Iowa, both of them are ranked in the top 10 in the country. Wow. College game days coming to Ames. So all the hype and the hoopla that comes with that. How do you guys see this matchup if you've had a chance to kind of look at it a little bit? And is it a game that Iowa State has to win if it's going to be in that CFP discussion at the end of the year?
Well, I will say for a team that hasn't won a whole lot over the years, Iowa State has some of the best fans you'll ever see.
True that.
And definitely some of the best tailgating you'll ever see.
Yes.
That's why it was so weird last year, walking up to that stadium and there's no tailgating.
Yeah.
But anyway, they're back and forth. And I like Iowa State in this one. I just think they're really good. Brock Purdy, to me, is a top flight quarterback. Mike Rose, really an outstanding linebacker. They got a lot of guys back. And I think I would take them at home.
Joseph, have you had a chance to kind of look at this one?
Best cream corn I ever had was in Des Moines before an Iowa State-Texas game. So they get my thumbs up just for that. But, to hit on it, they, from a distance and not following the conference as much, it's really been impressive what they've been able to build. And, last year they get to the Big 12 championship game and you just to see them because, I mean, they've had their moments. They've had big wins. I remember when they pulled off a big win in Austin a few years ago, and just to see them build up. But yeah, I think you're right. For them to be in that discussion, this would be that win, that signature win. You get some other ones later on. You'll probably face a top 10 Oklahoma at that point. You'll probably, if the Longhorns something doesn't happen, you'll get another opportunity there. So this will just add to the resume. And I think if you have, maybe you would probably have to win all three, but certainly if you can win this one, maybe split with the other ones, you're still in that discussion. So, I mean, this is as big as an early season game gets for a program like that.
Yeah, I agree with y'all. I do feel like, losses early in the season seem to be easier to overcome than obviously later on in the year. That's when you seemingly take a hit and if you lose early, maybe you can work your way back up. That said, I say it every year, the Big 12, in order to be in that discussion has to win these kind of non-conference games like this, the big ones. You got to do more than just beat the Sisters of the Poor and your other, little non-conference games. So these type of Power Five, and especially against a ranked team, a top 10 team, that would be a huge feather in Matt Campbell's hat. And certainly he's done an incredible job there in Ames. And this might be the next step, for them as a program. So Joseph mentioned cream corn, which is a great segue for us. We always try to close it by talking a little bit about food. We are sports writers. This is our culinary corner. So Joseph, John and I talked about it on the way to San Marcos last week, that we're especially excited to bring Houston back into the Big 12 mix. Houston's a great food city. We personally, just from a very selfish standpoint, we're rooting for like Tulane and Memphis to join the Big 12.
Can't argue with that.
Yeah, just some pretty good food there. But so, with Cincinnati and Orlando, the home of UCF, which of those two cities do you prefer in terms of food? And is there like a haunt there that you frequent when you make those trips?
Well, don't forget, we're not talking food, but BYU's kind of the headquarters of Marriott. So we're set with that too. If you're a Marriott guy, like I am, I'm looking forward to that. But, Cincinnati has the Montgomery Inn, which you call it the Boathouse. It's some of the best ribs I've ever had. And it's a Cincinnati style. They just fall off the bone. I'm not a big chili guy, so I don't do the Skyline chili, but Montgomery Inn, there's two locations. There's the original, which is in the city, and then, well, they're both in the city. This one's a little bit, out in the outskirts, but the Boathouse is right on the river near the baseball stadium, and it's usually hard to get in, so that's a good sign. But excellent ribs. You can't go wrong. They put the bib on you and get all messy. And with Central Florida, I would spend 6 weeks there for Major League Baseball training camp or spring training. And I can tell you, stay away from the Disney corridor. No good will come out of that. You'll pay overpriced for, the Rainforest cafes, sorry, Tillman, stuff like that. But that's probably going to be a sponsor of the Big 12 at some point.
No doubt. Bring that Tillman money in.
But, I have some hole in the walls that I like right off of, I think it's 192. It's in Kissimmee. There's a barbecue place called Fat Boys, which just the name alone, it's kind of one of those fill up your tank as much as you can. With baseball, there was never fine dining opportunities, but I like we have Buc-ee's here. They have Wawa over there, and Wawa sandwiches are some of the best. So you can walk into a little store and get a great sandwich for like $5. But my go-to place in Orlando was for surf and turf. And I went to a place called Fishbones, and they would have the best pork chop or blackened fish. And then they have this nice little drink called the Gulf of Mexico. It's about that big, and they would light it on fire. So, John, that's one of those drinks you might like, that about that tall. And you'll be feeling good for game day the next day.
Joseph, I got to say, I'm impressed by your attention to detail.
Nice. And John, if you weren't taking notes, I'm glad that we are recording this so we go back and make a list later. But this is some good tips. This is some good information. This is the need to know stuff.
Yeah, I'm going to say, for a guy who's from a great food city, to recommend these places like in Cincinnati and Orlando, that speaks a lot.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Try to explore when I'm on the road. Memphis would have been a great one. I'm going to be in Tulane in about a month, and I've already got a table set up for some gumbo. So that'll be good. The American has Philadelphia. It's another good, you're into cheesesteak. So, and then the American also has Annapolis, which you can get you some good chowder and some other stuff. So there's some good food opportunities in the American. I know we can't take them all. So, we'll bring the 3 to you, and you'll enjoy all 3 of those destinations.
Well, Joseph, are you sure you want to leave the Americans?
It's time. It's time.
It's time. It's time. Well, as you rejoin the Big 12, whenever this is, we will certainly share our, not that you don't know, but, we'll share what we've learned food wise over the years. Right, Johnny?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We'll do our best. You set a pretty high bar there though, Joseph.
Yeah.
I did hear that the 50-yard line is no longer around in Lubbock.
Yes.
It's not, it's gone. That was sad. We, it didn't, for a long time, it didn't really matter that it was gone because Baylor and Tech were playing football every year at AT&T at Jerry World. But yes, that was sad to hear that the 50-yard line.
In Kansas and Kansas State, I usually stay in Kansas City.
Yeah.
So you can get 2 trips there. There's some good barbecue there as well.
Good.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I was on the press corps for many years with the Longhorns. So there'll be no Lincoln, no College Station or Austin, but you can still get some good eats around there.
Yeah.
No Boulder. I'm a little disappointed, no Boulder. But,
true that. Yeah.
But yeah, we'll be okay. Stillwater, I think Eskimo Joe's is still around.
Mhm.
Yeah, Hideaway Pizza. Hideaway is a great one.
Mhm.
So yeah, we'll be sure to email you some of those stops.
Appreciate it.
But thanks for hopping on with us. And if we don't see you soon in the Big 12, we'll see you at the Final Four, baby.
Yeah, we always have that.
Good stuff. Thanks,
Appreciate it,
Joseph.
guys. Thanks.
All right.